All right. Okay. All right. Everyone can see me, I hope. If not, try to pin my video. It's not necessary. Focus on the board is always better. All right. So today we will move on to some applications of what we have already done. Traditionally, when I take up this thing, I normally start with central force problem on a classical mechanics course. So, but this time, since we had a detailed discussion of the Hamiltonian problems and the effective potential, etc., so then I feel there is a stronger case or stronger, what you say, or it is better to start with the problems involving small oscillations. That will be our topic for today. And today is basically an introduction to this. Because of our time lag, we didn't really miss, we missed only Tuesday's lecture and some extra lectures. So because of that, what I am planning is after today's lecture, I will be recording at least 2 more lectures on small oscillations. I will be putting it out during the vacation. Okay? We can have a discussion on those lectures after we meet at the end of the vacation, along with the tutorial on these particular topics involving small oscillations. Okay, so this module will basically, apart from today's introductory lecture, rest of it will be asynchronous mode. Not in a series of live lectures. You will get the recordings. You have to listen at your own pace, and please finish looking at the videos before end of the vacation, so that right after vacation when we meet, we'll have a tutorial sheet on small oscillations. At that time, we'll first have a session thrashing out any points which are not clear from the lectures. Is this okay? Does this make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
That is just to catch up on the syllabus, nothing more. And I mean, it's not difficult. Okay. So I can say it is not difficult. The problems involving small oscillations, basically, when you talk about small oscillation, the first thing which you realize is that your system will be near some equilibrium position. Let us try to see this in a series of examples. You know, simple pendulum. So the default position of a simple pendulum is hanging downwards, straight in the downward direction. Now, when you disturb it slightly from the downward direction, it undergoes small oscillations. Okay. So basically, it appears to be that a reason or a condition on a system which is performing small oscillations is that it should be at or near equilibrium. We are going to qualify this statement today, but first let us try to understand the concept here. What is equilibrium? Since it is a live class, I would like little participation from the audience. It is something I miss a lot from offline class. So at least a couple of responses from your side, if you can set the ball rolling. What do you understand by equilibrium? Anyone, please.
A state of least energy.
Very nice. Okay.
The boundary between two states.
Boundary between two states.
मतलब
Okay.
सर थोड़ा सा वेरिएबल होगा, तो जैसे अगर एक स्टेट में सर भी स्टार्टिंग में बॉडी रेस्ट पे है, तो उसमें लिटर चेंज होगा, तो वो उसका जो ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन होगा, तो दो स्टेट चेंज हो जाएंगे ना सर, मोशन में आ जाएगा बॉडी. सर ऐसा गैस और लिक्विड का एग्जांपल होता है ना सर. वैसा.
That is equilibrium between two phases, ne? You are
Yes,
talking
sir.
about. I don't think that is the context here, but okay. Least energy was one answer, and the second answer is related to no net force. Excellent, very good. So I think that is a good answer. No net force. Okay. When you say a system is at equilibrium, what is your observation of the system? What is it doing? Most stable state. Very good. Yes. What is the system doing when you say it is at equilibrium?
At rest.
At rest. Basically not changing. Okay. It is not changing, not evolving. This is a very general definition of equilibrium. If colloquial, but definitely general. For example, even the liquid gas equilibrium, which you said, why do you call it equilibrium? The total number of molecules in the liquid state and in the gaseous state remains the same. Which molecule is in liquid state and which is in gaseous state keeps changing, but the transfer is on both sides and the net number does not change, right? Even the other cases which you mentioned, there is no net force. That is again a consequence of the not change. Means what? If you recollect from something simple like Newton's first law, what does Newton's first law say? The system does not change unless there is an external force. So in a sense that also is correct. That is, there is no net external force. Okay. And if there is no net external force, then basically what you are saying is that the force, which is normally the gradient in the potential energy function, this is 0, which brings you to the other statement which you made, that if the gradient of the potential energy function is 0, then it means that the potential energy itself is a minimum. Is this correct? So all of these concepts which you mentioned, all these answers came from you. I am just connecting all of them in a chain. Okay? Equilibrium, no change in the system, no external force acting on the system, the potential energy being a minimum. All these things are more or less equivalent statements of each other. Do you agree?
Yes, sir.
Of course, if the potential energy function gradient is 0, it could also mean that the potential energy is a maximum. That is also a scenario which can be under this logic it is possible. Okay? Correct? So
Yes.
consider some general system which has a, let us say, one-dimensional system. Today we will be focusing more on one-dimensional potentials rather than going into some details. Later we'll try to go to many-dimensional systems where additional mathematical intricacies arise. But today we'll go simple. Okay? Consider there is some system which has a potential energy function like this, okay, as a function of x. Okay. What are the features in this potential energy function? It has minima. How many minima does it have?
Two minima, sir.
Very good. One minimum is here and there is another here. This is, at least given the current status of this curve, this is probably a global minimum. We don't know, later on at some other x it may go dip further down, but within the range which we are given, this is a global minimum, this is a local minimum. In between them there is a maximum. Okay. So x1 and x3 are positions of minima in the potential. X2 is a position of a maximum. We have recently seen such a curve when we looked at the bead riding on a loop problem in the context of Hamiltonian dynamics. That there it was a symmetrical W-shaped curve. Here it is asymmetrical, but basically you have these points. Now consider a mass. potential energy, let us try to make this a realistic thing. Suppose this is an actual mountain, okay? Then the potential energy basically is mg times height. So basically, higher you are, higher is the potential energy. So this can describe an actual physical terrain, mountain, small hill. There's a valley, there's a small hill here, again second valley, and again mountain, something like that. Imagine placing a particle over here, okay, at the maximum of the potential. What will this particle do is the question. What do you think it will do?
At rest.
Why? Do others agree with this?
Yes, sir. Because it is at maxima.
So
there is no change in a system.
Kinetic energy.
Change in coordinate.
why is there no change in coordinate?
सैलरी
You're right,
पॉइंट
there is no change.
Sir, kinetic
Sorry?
energy zero हो जाएगी.
Gradient
Kinetic
of
energy
potential
zero रहेगी, but zero ही क्यों रहेगी?
Sir, gradient of potential is zero. That's why.
Correct. So the force is zero because the gradient of the potential is. Since there is no force, it will remain here. This is a very, very important point which people don't appreciate. Let me try to give a more concrete example on this. It is related to atomic physics, but it's a very important thing nevertheless. Okay. Let us take, you must have studied lasers na, in BSc. So typically you are told that whenever you have a two-state system, there are three possible ways in which radiation interacts with this system. Okay. One is called absorption of light, in which a particle goes from the lower state to the upper state by absorbing a photon. This is called absorption. Correct?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Then you have the situation where the particle is already in the upper state and a light ray comes. This particle comes down and emits two photons instead of one. Okay. This process, if you recollect, is called the process of stimulated emission. Agreed?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
And there is a third process in which the particle is already in the excited state. There is no external radiation field, but this particle eventually comes to the lower state emitting a single photon. This is a process called spontaneous emission. Everyone agrees with all these things?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Now I would like to, हाँ जी बोलिए. Yes बोला ना, ठीक है. Now I would like to ask you a question. Out of these three processes, which process is odd man out? Let me label them so that it makes you easier.
सेकंड
I would like you all to enter in the chat box whatever is your choice, which is the odd man out of 1, 2 and 3. Okay. And I'm going to look at the chat box for around, as long as it takes. Good. So there are a few answers already. 2, 3, 2, 3, 3, 2. Okay. 3, okay. 2. Nice. There are quite a few votes. I am very happy about this. So, can you help me out? Can someone count? How many twos? How many? In YouTube, this is easy. It counts on its own and gives. But in a live class, it's. But basically, there are ones, there are twos, and there are threes. So this is a very interesting question. But if I count till now, There are around 15 twos. Five ones. And 11 threes. So very interesting voting. Eh? Let's write this down. Interesting hai ki nahi?
Yes, sir.
So there are 5 people who voted for absorption as the odd man out. 15 who voted for stimulated emission. These are approximate numbers. And 11, I think I counted. Who? Very good. So can someone from each of these categories justify their choice? Why do you think absorption is odd man out? What is the reason you felt that way? Anyone, please. Anyone who answered the option 1? Okay, very nice. So absorption is the odd man out because there is no emission. Excellent. What about those who said that stimulated emission is the odd man out? Anyone of you, please just give a brief justification. Anyone? I don't want to take names. Go back to the list and take names. I mean, that's why I'm giving you free choice.
Sir, for third one, we do not require any external photon for emission.
So it is odd man out. Agreed.
Yeah.
And what about second, stimulated emission?
So because there is an external factor that plays role there, right?
But there is in absorption also there is an external photon.
Sir, single photon absorption produces double photon.
Okay. That is why it is an odd man. Okay. I mean, normally the justification I get for stimulated spontaneous has no interaction with photon. How do you say that there is photon coming out? Na? So what you mean is there is no incoming photon. That is right. Okay. So now in this picture of 1 to 3, okay, absorption, stimulated emission, and I would like to change option 1 since one system is going from stable channel action. Okay, so very good point. According to me, now let me give you my answer. According to me, or let me throw this also to the class. Now, odd man out, all three can be justified. One of them is an absorption process, other two are emission process. So absorption is the odd man out. Two of them are having external photon input, one doesn't have. Therefore, spontaneous emission is odd man out. Usually for stimulated emission, no one has a concrete reason, but basically in school you are told that this is some very exotic process and therefore you feel it is odd man out. This is what normally happens. That is why there is a maximum number for option number 2, because we allow ourselves to be conditioned by what everyone says around us, and therefore option 2 has maximum votes. But when you come to think about it, there is no real way to justify why you should think of it as odd man out, other than when I was in BSc, my teacher told me that is a strange process, right? So let us try to examine this diagram of 3 processes with respect to the diagram which we have drawn upstairs. All of you were in quite good agreement that this particle will remain as it is, correct? Unless acted upon by an external force. Everyone agrees?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes, sir.
If that is the case, then now look at this guy, spontaneous emission. Is there any external influence?
No.
Then why is it taking place? It's an interesting question. All our laws of physics, everywhere we believe that everything should have a reason. Everything should have a causative agent. Mane something which causes that to happen. बराबर है? Every motion will have some reason in the history of that system where some force acted upon it. Correct? Here you have an example of what you can label as an acausal event, an event which is happening without any cause. Don't you find that little strange?
Sir, absorption
Bol.
and spontaneous emission both are
Hmm.
related process, na?
No, absorption is happening because you are externally influencing the system. Spontaneous
And then-
emission is happening for no reason.
But sir, first electron absorbs the energy photon and then it goes in upper orbit and then
Correct,
it-
but upper stable orbit. That is also a stable state. No?
yes, but it rests there for 10 raised to minus 8 seconds, so it come down again.
Why? Who
Yes.
tells him to come down?
Huh?
Who tells him to come down? You are assuming that it will come down. How? To go up, you have to give an external. You have to give an external
Yes.
force, so-called. No, not really a force. You are giving energy, but basically,
Mhm.
I mean, you are giving an external influence, and it
Okay,
goes
so-
to an upper state and remains there. And that upper
Yes,
state is a stable state. It is not continuously moving. It actually moves to an upper stable orbit, according to Bohr theory, what you call stable orbit, right?
Yes.
After that, what is the reason for coming down? This is like saying that I pumped the water to the 4th floor of my building, and then after some time, the water decided to come down on its own without any.
Mhm. So there is no reason to come down, but it comes down now.
It can lower its energy, yes, but I mean, why will it lower its that way? According to that
Yes.
logic, even in this potential energy curve, there are two lower energy states nearby, but the
Mhm.
particle doesn't move unless you disturb it. Okay.
Yes.
Several examples are there. I can place some object on an egg ले लो, egg को ऐसा balance कर सकते हैं एकदम perfectly. Disturb it a little, it rolls over. ठीक है?
Mhm.
Many such examples are there.
Okay.
In all these cases, the equilibrium is not a stable equilibrium. I'll come to this terminology, but basically, if you disturb it, it will go away and go to a lower energy state. But the crucial point is you have to disturb. If you don't disturb, it will remain. Okay? I know that we are trained to think this way, that in atoms, the electron wants to go down. But that want to go down does not mean it is able to go down. In order to enable it to go down, there has to be an external influence. Otherwise, this is very dangerous for our whole construction of physics as a subject. See, if things starts happening for absolutely no reason on their own, that means fundamentally there is something wrong with our understanding of nature. Okay? So, spontaneous emission, even though in school we are told that this is a very natural thing, atom wants to go down in energy, blah, blah, blah. If you think about it carefully, it's not that simple. I mean, rather it is a little dangerous for your whole, it will destroy your whole, what you say,
understanding.
fundamental thought process behind physics. Ki there should be a causative agent behind everything. Mohit, you are saying something?
No, sir, same thing.
Yeah. So
sir-
yeah, बोलो.
सर अगर सपोज एब्जॉर्प्शन हुआ एंड फिर लेटर स्टेज पे स्पॉन्टेनियस एमिशन हुआ तो वो चलेगा ना मतलब
Spontaneous emission क्यों होता है? लेकिन there should be no spontaneous process in nature at all. Otherwise, I mean, anything can happen spontaneously, na? Energy conservation is happening here, but apart from that, there is a concept which is at stake here. The concept is that every reaction by any system should have an action to start with. I mean, in colloquial language, okay? If things start happening for no reason, then there is a need to seriously rethink. Yes, Akshay, bolo. So, yeah, bolo.
Sir, there is a reason that Pauli's exclusion principle doesn't allow that electron.
What doesn't it allow? Pauli's exclusion
Electrons-
principle doesn't allow two fermions to have the same state. That's all. Here there is no such. I mean, in Bohr model of the atom, there is no Pauli exclusion principle. This is one electron atom. Now there is only one electron. There is no exclusion principle at all. Exclusion starts when you have two fermions. Yes, Satish, bolo.
सर वो इलेक्ट्रॉन हाईएस्ट स्टेट से लोअर स्टेट में इसलिए आता है क्योंकि न्यूक्लियर अट्रैक्शन सर रहता है ना, उस पे वो फोर्स डिस्टर्ब करता है उसको, उसके स्टेबिलिटी को.
हाँ, पर न्यूक्लियर अट्रैक्शन फिर उसके हिसाब से अर्थ शुड गो टू वीनस इज ऑर्बिट इवेंचुअली. व्हाई डजंट इट गो? अर्थ इज इन a stable orbit, that is why. ठीक है?
Yes, sir.
So, I mean, Earth is continuously attracted by sun, but does it fall into the sun? No.
No, sir.
So, even when you look at Bohr's very crude planetary model of the atom, Bohr model of the atom as we call it, even within that, it doesn't make sense that there should be spontaneous emission. Even though Bohr model is very crude and not at all the correct picture of atomic physics, but nevertheless, even in that, it is clear that इधर कुछ तो घपला है. ठीक है? I just wanted to point out that this behavior is very strange. Of course, let me break the suspense for you. When you come to quantum field theory or quantum electrodynamics in particular, basically the vacuum of quantum electrodynamics. When a vacuum means normally we expect there is nothing. Okay? But the QED vacuum is basically continuously generating and annihilating electrons and positrons, or they will be interacting through photons. So there will be virtual photons all the time zooming around, which don't contribute to the total energy because they are consistent with Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Heisenberg uncertainty principle says that you are allowed to have delta E amount of energy, extra or less, so provided you come back to normal within delta T amount of time. So basically, you can borrow a arbitrary amount of energy, provided you borrow it only for a certain amount of time and then give it back. So basically, spontaneous emission is explained in this context by saying that the atom or the electron, whoever you want to talk about, basically borrows energy to get a virtual photon which will stimulate this particular process, and then that virtual photon is given back to the universe. It is like तुम्हारा कुछ तो कर्ज अटका हुआ है किधर, तो तुम थोड़ा सा पैसा लेगा, उसको देगा और बाद में तुम्हारा पैसा ले लेगा, ये पैसा वापस दे देगा, something of that kind. I mean, roughly. Basically, the point is that spontaneous emission is not spontaneous. It is also stimulated emission. Only thing is the photon is not a external photon field provided by you, but rather a result of the vacuum fluctuation of the vacuum near the atom. Bolo, Sunil.
Sir, does virtual particles contribute to the increase in the entropy of the universe?
It's a very good question, and I am afraid I don't know. But my guess is they won't, because they are virtual. They are not present forever. They come and they go back. Whether they contribute to the overall calculation of the entropy is a very good question, and I suppose people who do QED, if they ever think about such things, would have to count over states of virtual particles also, I suppose. I really have no real idea about this. I mean, based on my knowledge of statistical mechanics, they would have to count, I suppose. But I'm not really sure. Okay? That is my answer. Can these virtual or are they purely theoretical? It's a very good question. The virtual photon is a theoretical construct, agreed, but there are situations where you can detect these particles. That is how your particle identifications at large colliders like CERN and all work out. You start with the theory of quantum electrodynamics. It tells you that these particles will be involved, and then you sometimes end up detecting some of these particles before they are going back into the continuum, and therefore you are quite confident that this theory is correct, experimentally verified. Okay? But I mean, in such a process like spontaneous emission, can you detect the virtual photon who actually was responsible for the spontaneous emission? Answer is no. Okay? But I mean, it is not a theoretical construct without any experimental evidence. It can be experimentally verified in a slightly different context. I hope that answer serves. Okay? Let us come back to the main mudda of what we were discussing. So basically, first point, even though this point is a maximum in the potential energy curve, if the particle is located at this particular location, it will not move unless pushed by an external influence. We are all agreed upon this? Yes?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Very good. So beyond that, all this was extra. Any of you who didn't follow this virtual photon or found it too strange, A, ignore it, or B, read up about it. B is preferable, definitely. But that has nothing to do with classical mechanics. I'm now coming back to the classical mechanics part of it. What happens if I push this guy slightly on this side? Imagine there is a car whose brakes are not
It will
working, which
fall
is at the
off.
top of a hill. I push him. What happens? Huh?
Fall off, गिर जाएगा नीचे.
गिर जाएगा मतलब he'll roll down this hill,
हाँ,
something
roll
like that. He'll roll down and eventually reach here. बराबर है? So if I push the particle, it tries to find the nearest minimum in the potential. It reaches there. Okay? Of course, because of kinetic energy conservation, by the time he reaches here, potential energy has decreased, so kinetic energy has increased, and therefore he'll continue to go. Eventually, the total energy will reach, then again he'll come back, blah, blah, blah. But let us not go into too much detail. Basically, this guy goes down. That is what we are interested in, that behavior. Is this okay?
Yes, sir.
What
Yes,
happens
sir.
when you push
Yes,
on the other side?
Same, it will go with
Same over.
minimum.
Very good. It will do the same thing, but it finds the minimum in the direction in which it is pushed. Okay? If it is pushed to the left, it will find the closest minimum on the left. If it is pushed to the right, it will find the closest minimum on the right. What about this guy now? If I push this guy, suppose he reached here and I took away his energy and he stopped here. Now he is here at equilibrium and not moving. Now I push this guy slightly. What will happen?
So it will depend on how hard you push the object.
I push very slightly. I'm not pushing hard at all.
Sir, oscillate करेगा.
So the
Small.
हाँ परत है ना
It start moving first in the direction I pushed naturally.
हाँ,
But as we said, potential energy is increasing. So whatever kinetic energy you had given, that will decrease. Total energy is conserved. Remember that. Okay? So when you go up along a potential energy curve, your kinetic energy keeps on decreasing. And when you are going down on a potential energy curve, your kinetic energy keeps on increasing. Obviously. Okay? I mean, this is a simple concept, but it serves to remember this always. Okay? So if you push slightly, this guy will start going here, but soon his kinetic energy becomes zero. And then he gets pushed back, and so he will oscillate over. Okay? Similarly, here also, if I push this guy on any one direction, he will initially go up, but then he will oscillate. Everyone agrees with this?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Particle at a position of
Yes, sir.
unstable equilibrium when pushed moves towards the nearest minimum in the potential. Particle which is at a position of stable equilibrium, it is pushed, then it goes and comes back, so it oscillates. Okay. So there are two types of equilibrium positions. Type condition behavior. First type is called a stable equilibrium. Stable equilibrium condition, the potential is a minimum, and behavior it oscillates near the The second type is an unstable equilibrium. The behavior is it agreed.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Very good. We are clear about these things. Excellent. Now, suppose I want to study the exact nature of the motion near the position of equilibrium. Then how will I go about it? This is the next question, natural question. Ultimately, we have got a qualitative understanding of things, that if I push, it will do like this. If I push from here, it will go like this. So this is a qualitative understanding, story level understanding. We also want a quantitative understanding. Mane, we should have an equation which predicts how the motion is going to take place. Correct? How will we achieve that? Basically, let us try to examine the, let me not say behavior here because it will get confusing. Okay, let me draw a line here so that it is okay. We are interested in studying the nature of v of x near a minimum, correct? Suppose I'll have to draw another diagram. So let me do a small one here. Is visible, right?
Yes, sir.
Those who are on a phone, it will be a little small, but you can catch it up on YouTube even better. No, I am seeing it on a phone. It's okay, decent. I mean, okay, it's small. Okay, but you can manage. This is the position of the equilibrium, stable equilibrium point. Agreed? And this
Yes.
is the value of the minimum potential. We are interested in knowing how it behaves near this point. Barabar hai? So let me draw this a little better. Something like that. This is still a minimum, na? Everyone agrees. The shape is not like parabolic types, but it is still a minimum. Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
I rubbed it again, but something like that. Okay. Now, we are interested in v of x near x0. Barabar hai? So let me say that x, the actual displacement, is x0 plus s, where s is the small displacement away from x0, which is what I am interested in. Small displacement away from x0. Agreed?
Yes, sir.
So I can write this as v of x0 plus s, where it is understood that s is a very small quantity. That is our underlying assumption in this whole argument, our whole discussion. Okay. Then I can expand this in a Taylor series. Okay. So if I expand this as a, by the way, last time I had asked about Taylor series and people said that we are not familiar, and I had said please get familiar with it because it's going to be a useful concept. I very sincerely hope all of you took that advice and brushed up on your Taylor series. So it makes it easier for you, basically. This will be v of x naught plus s times I hope everyone is familiar with this. Okay, I don't know what happened. Back. Thank God. Yeah. I hope everyone is familiar with this. Okay. This is how the expansion will look, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, let us try to look at all these terms one by one. Okay. First term is v of x naught, correct? Second term is derivative of v with respect to x evaluated at x naught. What can you say about this guy? What is the meaning of dv by dx? Mane geometrical meaning?
How he changes at that
Change in
point.
velocity.
Correct. Slope. Good. Change in velocity, slope, both the things. A change in velocity nahi hai. It is just change in potential, which is also going to be changing, but that is like bringing in Newton's law unnecessarily. All these things have to be evaluated at x naught. Geometrically, it is a slope. Ne? What is the slope of v, tangent to v at this point? It's going to be a flat line, so slope is 0. Barabar hai? So dv by dx will be 0 when evaluated at x naught because x naught is the minimum position. Everyone agrees with this?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
So
sir.
this term is going to be 0 due to the nature of the potential. Okay. Everyone agrees with this? Yes.
Yes, sir.
Barabar hai. What about the first term? This is nothing but this v mean value, na, which is labeled over here in the curve. Correct? Potential energy at x naught. Yes. When you are actually going to do the derivation, you are interested in the force, right? This is just a constant value. So potential energy is this constant value plus this plus that, so many things. Barabar hai? So out of that, this is just a constant. Therefore, you can easily shift your origin of the potential. Mane, what we mean is that basically you use the gauge freedom in the potential, because when you calculate force, derivative of this term is going to be 0. Okay. So basically this is just a gauge term. So it can be made 0 by a suitable choice of gauge. Choice of gauge in this case is just a fancy way of saying that this guy is constant, his time is a derivative with respect to x is going to be anyway 0, and therefore it is not a dynamically relevant quantity. It is not going to affect the dynamics of the system. When I write down the equation of motion, that v of x naught is not going to contribute. Okay. If you want to understand it in the Lagrangian context, you say that it can be gauged away. It is a gauge term. You can eliminate it by suitable choice of gauge. Okay. Either way you want to look at it is fair enough. What about these ... higher terms? What can you say about those? You can neglect all of them. Why? Because S is very, very small. If S is small, then S square is smaller, S cube, S power 4 and all will be extremely small. Barabar hai? Agreed?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Now what remains is only one term. And if you look at that term, basically it is the second order derivative of v with respect to x evaluated at this particular point x naught. This is going to be some number, correct? I am going to call this number as k. Okay? It is some constant. I am going to call it k. Is this okay? Then finally, what do you end up with? After all this is done, basically you end up with the potential energy as a function of S is approximately equal to half ks square. By the way, the approximation is only here, neglecting the higher order terms. These two terms can always be made 0. There is no approximation there. This term is 0 because the potential is minimum at that point. Second term. This term is 0 because of this term can be neglected, because you can always say that my 0 of potential energy starts at the bottom of the potential, and therefore potential is 0. Okay. When you calculate, for example, gravitational potential mgh, h is measured from some point. So I can say that I am going to measure h from the bottom of the potential well. Therefore, potential value at that point is 0. This is always true. So there is no approximation in neglecting the first two terms. The approximation is in neglecting the higher order terms. That is why there is an approximately equal to sign over here. Is this okay? Before moving on to the next page, I would like to pause here. You can review this, and if there is any doubt, any question, you can ask. Let me just complete one more point before that. There is this, if you look at this, this is basically a parabolic curve, ne? Half ks square. Okay? So basically when you say I am going to neglect this thing for small s, what you mean is that basically you are approximating this guy by this curve. I hope you can see the yellow curve. If not, I'll make it darker. So this is the half k square curve. Okay. And this is the v of x. So you can see that v of x and half k square. Why is there an approximately equal to sign? Because you are making an approximation. Your x approximation is valid only very close to x0. As you move away from x0, your approximation is no longer valid. Okay, is this okay? Any doubts, questions, queries, comments? Please ask. I'm going to
Sir.
pause for a couple of minutes. Yes, Polo.
Sir, why we are not saying that if dv by dx is 0, then d square v by dx square, why it is not 0?
Because you have to substitute x0 to make it 0. So before you substitute, it is just a function of x. And the first order derivative is not 0 everywhere. It is 0 only at x0. Okay.
Okay. If we substitute x naught in second order differential equation derivative, then this term will be 0, na?
No,
dv square.
it won't be. Mane, the derivative of dv by dx at x0. No. Take a simple example, na? Cos theta. Take v is cos theta. Okay. dv by dx will be sin theta. Now sin theta is 0 at theta equal to 0. Agreed?
Sir, repeat.
Take v is cos theta. dv by d theta will be sin theta. Yes, minus sin theta. Minus sin theta is 0 at what value of theta?
90 degree.
No, 0. Theta equal to 0. Sin theta we are talking about.
Barabar.
What is the derivative of that? Which is the second derivative of the potential? Minus cos theta. That is not 0 at theta equal to 0.
Sir, samajhla. Okay.
So the derivative, you are not taking derivative of the evaluated function dv by dx at x0. You are first taking the derivative and then substituting x. That is the difference. There is a difference between taking d by d theta of sin theta and taking d by d theta of 0. D by d theta of 0 is 0 only. That is what you are talking about. But you should not take like that. You should take d by d theta of sin theta and then substitute theta equal to 0. Okay? Okay. Anything else? Rutuja, you are saying something?
नो सर, म्हणजे हेच मी
Okay.
विचारणार होते की काय डीवाय डीव्हीचं.
तर ते झालं ना क्लिअर. म्हणजे
Okay, yes, sir.
सबस्टिट्यूट आधी नाही करायचं. आधी केलं की तो एक आकडा बनतो, नंबर बनतो, त्याचा डेरिव्हेटिव्ह 0च येणार.
Yes, sir.
आधी डेरिव्हेटिव्ह काढायचं, नंतर सबस्टिट्यूशन करायचं. ठीक आहे.
हां.
Sir,
Bolo.
can you explain the last part of the equation, the neglect for small s?
Because s is small, therefore you can neglect s cube, s power 4, etc. in comparison with s square. That is the approximation. Okay. Because s is small, s square will be even much smaller than s that way. If s is 0.01, then s square will be 0.0000. It can be neglected. That
Okay, sir.
and physically, how do you understand this? Only when s is very close to this, the approximate potential is the yellow curve in this potential energy curve, and the white curve is the original curve. So where does the yellow curve meet the original curve? Only very close to x0, na?
Yes, sir.
Everywhere else it is diverging. So your validity of this approximation is only in this region, where both are. I hope you can see the point.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, where both are like very close to each other. At other places, for example, here half k square and v of x are completely divergent from each other. So you cannot apply this approximation for large values of s. Only for small values of s it is applicable. And how small or how large depends on your actual function you have to see. But you can always find out for what value of s the higher order term are smaller than the s square term. And then you can define that my result is valid only in this range. That type of thing. Okay?
Okay, sir.
Yeah. Anything else? No. Good. All right. Let us try to see a couple of examples of what we mean by this so that it becomes more concrete. Okay. As a first example, let us take a simple pendulum. You know the figure for a simple pendulum, everyone knows, obviously. There is a point of support which you treat as the origin. There is a vertical axis. There is a mass suspended from a rod of length L, and it is oscillating with angle theta. For the purpose of this particular problem, I am going to call this distance as y. So it is measured in the downward direction. And of course, this distance is x. It is measured away from the equilibrium position of the pendulum. Everyone is okay with this, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
And we know that L square is equal to x square plus y square. This is the constraint on the pendulum. And therefore, we can say that y is equal to square root of L square minus x square. Or, I mean, better way of writing it, convenient way of writing it, L square minus x square to the power half. Is this okay? Yes?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Very good.
Yes,
So
sir.
now, what is the potential energy? Minus mgy.
MGY.
Y is measured downward, that is why you have a minus. Okay? Which becomes, therefore, if you want to write v as a function of x, it becomes minus mg times L square minus x square to the power half. Agreed?
Yes, sir.
Sir.
Now, हाँ बोलो, हाँ. So, yes, Anand, बोलो. You wanted to say something? I
No,
thought
sir.
there was a raised hand. Yeah, okay. You can expand this as a Taylor series. So you will get v of x is equal to minus mg. I am going to do it first. Since there is already L square and x square, I'll expand it in a straightforward manner. This way. Watch. L square to the power half minus mg into minus x square into half L square to the power minus plus higher order terms. Basically, I have taken f of x as L square. The usual Taylor series is, I am not going to use x here. Let me say s plus h. F of s plus h is equal to f of s plus h f dash of s plus h square by 2 factorial f double dash of s plus dot dot dot. This is known to everybody, right? Taylor series formula. Function is square root. S is taken at L square and h is taken as minus x square. That is what we have done here. It is a shortcut, I know. Ideally, you should take x as the, what you say, s as 0 and h as x and do it. That will just lead to 2 additional steps, but you will end up at the same place. This is a slightly shorter way and you get the same thing anyway. Okay. Look at the first term. It is a gauge term, it's a constant, na? Okay. It is a constant, m is a constant, g is a constant, l is a constant. Okay. So you can just chuck that term. You don't have to worry about it. Similarly, you neglect the higher order terms because they will contain higher powers of x. They will contain x power 4, x power 6, etc. And so you end up with v of x is equal to half m g l. Sorry. What is L square to the power minus half? Oops. Hello?
So it's -1.
Huh? L power minus 1, which is 1 by L. Correct. So, m into g by L into x square. Now, if you examine this term, what can you guess from here? Or what does it look like? Another way of asking the same question. It looks like the potential energy term of a harmonic oscillator. Okay. What is the actual usual form of potential energy term for a harmonic oscillator?
Half K.
Simple. K, but K is in turn you can write in terms of omega. You will get half m omega square x square. Correct?
Yes, sir.
So compare half m omega square x square with half m g by L x square. What do you get?
Omega equals root of-
You will find that g by L is omega. Omega is square root of g by L. Basically, it gives you the oscillation frequency of the pendulum without solving the differential equation. When you solve the differential equation also, ultimately you identify omega as square root of g by L. Here you can make that identification without going too much. Only you have to do a Taylor series expansion of the potential. If you need only the time period, it already gives you. And then basically for harmonic oscillator, you know the form of the equation of motion. So there is no great difficulty there. Okay. If we get time today, we'll just have a brief revision of that also. Okay. But basically, you can get directly the frequency of the oscillation of the pendulum without solving anything. That you can get when you write the equation of motion in terms of theta also, I agree, but I mean, you get it by this also. This is in general very useful for n number of different problems where this kind of thing can be done. Okay. Any arbitrary problem where you are looking out for oscillation, you can do this and you will get the result. Okay. Is this okay? Yes, fine.
Yes.
No.
Yes, sir.
Very good.
Yes, sir. Okay.
Very good. Of course, you can start with theta also. If you express this in terms of theta, you will get minus mg cos theta. MGL cos theta. My mistake. If you expand this as a Taylor series, what do you get? Minus MGL cos theta can be directly expanded as 1 minus theta square by 2 plus theta power 4 by 24 minus dot dot dot. This itself comes from a Taylor series expansion of cos theta around theta equal to 0. But if you are uncomfortable with this, same way if you are uncomfortable with the way this was done, you can do it by the long way. You will get the same result ultimately. I'm just saying. Okay. Similarly here also you can go by the long way, no problem, but you will end up getting the same result. Basically you have minus MGL plus half MGL theta square plus higher order terms. As usual, the initial two terms, or here the second term was automatically 0 in the natural expansion of cos theta, but otherwise it can be put to 0. This is a gauge term. And these are neglected for small values of theta. Similarly, here it is neglected for small values of x. Okay. Therefore, you are left with a quadratic term in theta. And if you examine this carefully, you know that x is equal to L sine theta. In the small theta approximation, you can write x is equal to L theta. So then this potential is the same as the earlier potential. Okay. It is, you can write it as in terms of x square or in terms of L square theta square. The frequency is again square root of g by L. It's the same thing basically. So you get this irrespective of what type of potential you write down, the simplification reaches the same place. Has to. You are doing small oscillations. The key point is when you are studying small oscillations near an equilibrium position, the simplest approximation which you can make is the harmonic oscillator approximation. You can always expand the potential, any potential. If you look at the previous part of the board, this was an arbitrary potential. We didn't know what is the nature of this potential. Nevertheless, the lowest approximation is always a harmonic oscillator approximation. So any oscillation, as long as the oscillation amplitude is small, can be treated as a simple harmonic oscillation. If it is not simple harmonic, if it is damped, then it can be treated as a damped simple harmonic oscillation. If it is driven by an external force, it can be treated as a driven or forced simple harmonic oscillation. But the simple harmonic nature is always true for small amplitudes. Okay? That is what we showed in the previous slide, that any potential you expand, first order approximation, the lowest relevant dynamic term is of the form proportional to square of the displacement, proportional to s square or whatever variable you call it. Okay. All right. Next couple of lectures on this topic on small oscillations will be recorded lectures. We won't be having live sessions for that. I'll be sending it out during the vacation. When we come back after the vacation, we'll have a review of this, including the tutorial, and then we'll move on to central force and scattering motion. Okay. I think that is all from my end for today. Any questions, comments, queries, please ask. Otherwise, we'll close. Thank you.